everybody. Welcome to another episode of Whitley Penn Cast Matters podcast. We continue on with our family office series. Today, I'm excited to have Ray Dinunzio with TOS Advisors with us as my guest. Welcome, Ray.
Thanks for having me, John. Good to see you. Good morning.
Good morning. So, why don't you give the audience an introduction of you and TOS and maybe some of your background so the listeners will know kind of your perspective you're coming from.
Sure. Traditional finance background. I spent 18 years in a really large global bank. Was on the executive team for their private wealth management division in the United States and their family office practice for North America. Our family office practice, I mean, every firm has one, I guess, nowadays, but they're all a little bit different. Ours was really catered towards the largest family offices in North America that mostly resembled an asset management firm. So these would be super powerhouse investment teams. One of the family offices has an investment team of 60, one 100, and we were balance sheet partners. So in that practice, we were execution specialists doing things like acquiring 737 leases, financing split sports teams. You really name it, whatever they were trying to do, we would be matching up against them from a balance sheet capacity. Very interesting business. Private wealth management division was your traditional ultra high net worth client business. Certainly worked with billionaires there, but the sophistication level wasn't the same, right? I mean, these were professional investors working inside of these family offices that much more resembled an asset management firm than they do most family offices in the United States. And so it was a very narrow business. Smallest client that we worked with over there was probably $2 billion. So it gives you sort of some of the color of the folks that we would work with. 2016, after 18 years with one institution, I kind of felt like that one lasted longer than my first marriage, and it was probably time for us to part ways. Right? So I was able to retire. They had a program there that made it look like your length of service and your age combined. If it was greater than 63, they let you take off. So did that. Spent a year on the sideline, actually working with a bunch of guys in the movie production business in Los Angeles. Very, very fun industry. Very creative people. It was a very powerful firm. The firm is now New Republic Pictures with something like 14 Academy Awards, amazing films. But that was really a placeholder. You know, in financial services, John, you've got a background in this too, that they kind of give you a year period if you retire before you can go somewhere else that's a registered firm.
Right.
Thought I was going to go back into that. Had met with a very large bank in the United States, and they were interested in me looking at running a program for them. And honestly, after 18 years with a really big firm, the thought of going to another one with a couple 100,000 employees just wasn't appealing, right? It's just sort of like been there, done that. And I thought the next thing I would do would really be based on outcome in building something. And so TOS really was originally a single family office. And it had a unique structure to it in that it was structured as a registered investment advisor with only one client. And that was very intentional. The family had a holding company with 9 operating businesses, sold the largest business, several $1 billion. It was a very well-structured transaction cross-border. And you'll understand this from, tax and accounting. What that means is lots of lawyers, lots of structures, lots of entities, a lot of different stuff in different locations around the world. So that required an awful lot of work to do and to track all those different things on a monthly and quarterly and annual basis. And because of that structure and because there were so many different entities, the guidance from the law firm that helped the family, one of the law firms, was that they would invariably probably have to register as an investment advisor, right, under the post-Dodd-Frank. And that was not appealing to the family at all. They were super private. And as such, the idea from the law firm was, well, there'll be a registered investment advisor over here, and that's what TOS originally was. But it really only had one client, and it wasn't commercial. So from the appearances on the outside looking in, it looked like an RIA. From the
Right.
inside looking out, it was a family office for one family. And so that's actually a really interesting structure. We've come across some other family offices that have structured their stuff that way. There's a big private equity group out of Dallas, Fort Worth, who we'd all know, and they've done the same thing. Really, that's just for anonymity, that anybody looking in when they go to the SEC's website or go to Edgar filings, they don't know whose family office it is, right?
Right.
So, this family office went through the trials and tribulations of many. It was originally started in 2012. And I'd say they went down the traditional path of trial and error, right? Of how do we do this in the family office?
Hmm.
Certainly, it looked a lot like an embedded family office. They trusted everyone around and brought people in from the different operating businesses and whatnot, and people that they certainly trusted. But probably over a 6-year period, I think they were on their third rewrite of technology, right? And
Yep.
so that's the traditional path for most family offices, right? They hire consulting firms, and they're good people and they're knowledgeable people, and they try and do their best. But I think a lot of the problem with technology from a family office standpoint, and certainly we've observed this, is even when you get the right technology, like Tanya Neld says this, even when they pick the right technology, 50% of the time they have a bad outcome, right? And so that's an awful lot of variability for people to try and cope with. And so my friends were going through this exercise again for the third time, and they called me up and they knew I was doing a bunch of things at the time. We were working on some technology projects with a private equity backed firm. And so we tested a lot of this technology all the time. That was what we
Hmm.
did, uh, sort of at another firm that I was a partner with for about a year. And they said, "Hey, can you help us figure this out?" And it was a really interesting exercise. Like, observe what they were trying to deal with, and it just seemed to me that I felt like everybody was looking at this incorrectly. First, like that most people will acquire technologies, they tend to do it over time, right? So they end
Hmm.
up with this sort of Frankenstein
Hmm.
structure of technologies that inherently don't speak. And the folks over at Bain did a really interesting research piece recently, and they called it the swivel. And what you're doing is you're taking data from one place, and the swivel chair moves that person sitting in that chair, then swivels over to another system and moves the data over there.
Right.
And what we were really trying to do was design the most efficient single family office experience possible. The true north that we had for this family was they really didn't want any more people around. And every time they looked at more technology, it required more people, right? And the outcome that they wanted from the technology was never really what they wanted, right? But we don't know this when we acquire technology, right? Because we buy in on user interfaces,
Right.
show us samples, and we do a demo, and it looks nice. And then, a year later, we're like, well, it's not really what I thought it was going to be, right?
Right.
Didn't really achieve everything that we wanted. And so we kind of reverse engineered this. We started with the outcome in mind, right? What we looked at was, we met with hundreds and hundreds of family offices. And when we were going through this exercise, meeting with a lot of family offices and interviewing people in the family offices and understanding, like, what does each individual in the family office do? And we've all heard that little cute expression, right? Like, if you've been to one family office, you've been to one family office. But the reality is, from an operational administrative side of things, they're very similar, if not the same. Processing of a capital call for $1 million isn't very different than one for $50 million, right? There's probably higher callback provisions, but it's all that data, right, that you have to recognize, execute, keep track of, look for your cash balances, all these different things. And so what we ended up doing, was really like sitting down with all these individuals. What does John do every day in his job as an investment analyst? What technology does he use? How many times does he touch this data? Where does the data go? What output does John create from his desk? Why is it created? The person that John reports to, like, why does she want John working on this way? What does she do with it? Right. And then provisionally we looked at things like where were you with headcount 5 years ago, 3 years ago, today? Where do you think you're going to be in 3 years and 5 years? What technology budget do you use? What's the budget for the whole office? Um, and why do you do things the way you do? And then lastly, and we picked up this from like a lot of work from Boston Consulting Group, how would you rate your family office on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being a high performing family office? Which, by the way, when we did the work with BCG, it's a unicorn. There's no such thing as a high performing family office. Like we've seen
Right.
the biggest, right? We work with some extraordinarily large family offices, and admittedly, they know they're not high performing. They have good investment teams, they have good people, but it's just a mess, right?
Right.
There's always a fire drill. There's surprises on taxes. There's all these different things that you would want to mitigate if you ran a company. You would run the company differently. And something happens, I think, to people when they get this big liquidity profile and they stand up the family office. They don't focus as rigidly as they did their company that they sold for $2 billion,
Right.
right? And so it's not intentionally unprofessional. It's there's no blueprint for running a high performing family office, and since there isn't one, it's trial and error. And I call John, what do you use? Why do you use it? Where'd you get your team from? How did you staff this? Like all these different things coming together. And so we did all that work and we whiteboarded out like literally all the operations of a family office. We tried to count keystrokes, right? We're like, okay, if this is really going to work and we're going to create this experience, it's not about the tech, it's about
Right.
the outcome that you could have. And if you focus on what you want the outcome to be and then back into it, it's just directionally different. And you come out with a radically different experience from the technology.
Right.
Look at 20 family offices all using the exact same type of technology, the exact same pieces. The variability in performance of the family office and outcome and how many calories are spent, right? We would estimate, and it's extraordinarily high, that probably 70% of the calories in a family office are spent on what we would call chore work, operations,
Right.
administration. And the reality is, the reason you have a family office theoretically is to hire really smart people to look after your money and grow your wealth, right? Um,
Right.
and so we would call that core strategic work. And so what we keep thinking of is this balance between core and chore, right? And our true north was we never wanted a human to touch data. And our thesis on this was the more humans that touch things, the more prone they are for errors. They're going to get to them when they get to them. Could we create an environment where the data always remained digital? And that's sort of, that was our paramount focus. And when we thought about this too, we didn't just stop inside the four walls of the family office. We went to some of the largest law firms in the country that focus on family offices and say, what all do you do for the family office? How do you get data? What are you doing in structuring? What are you doing and how you're doing these things? Are you doing a lender case, right? Structure for the family. And then we also went to some heady tax firms and accounting firms and did the same. So armed with all of that information, we curated an experience based on outcomes. And what we wanted to do was create persona-based relationships to the data. So at the end of the day, what it's really all about, and it's not about technology, which is sold, it's about extracting data, structuring data, and visualizing data, and having data move everywhere you want it to move and live without a human touching it. And that's called a canonical data structured environment. That's what we do.
Well, one thing in all that I want to know is, did you get any movie roles?
No, we did go. My wife enjoyed the red carpet a lot, right? And we were at the opening of Hacksaw Ridge with Mel Gibson and the tall guy.
Clint
Uh,
Eastwood, right?
no, it was Vince Vaughn. And so Vince was very attracted to my wife. He kept coming up to her, and then Mel Gibson's like, "Hey, Vince, back off! It's Ray's wife. They're the one who funds our movies, dude. Don't make him mad." Right? It was like it was pretty funny.
That is
He's a
funny.
really funny guy, very good guy. They're quite the characters, the two of them.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you definitely said a lot, and I think that the things I really got out of it was, a couple things. One is the nuance of a family office, right? And you said, I mean, it's a story we always hear. You've seen one family, I've seen them all, but I've always felt like there's 80%. I'll use it loosely 80%, there's a similarity of what they're trying to accomplish, and then there's 20% nuance.
Right.
Maybe that's overstated, maybe that's understated, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of standard processes. There's a lot of standardization that a family office. So there's only, I mean, you could own different asset classes. You have kind of different results that you want to achieve and those kind of things. But at the end of the day, there still is this same structure that you have to have in order to get the output you need in order to make the best decisions you can make. So I've always, kind of felt like that. So, it's always good to hear, some of that confirmation. I think what the other thing that I understood was the, instead of going after features and functions, right, of software, take a step back and what are you trying to achieve? What's the output look like? And then back into what the tools are in order to do that. So that feels like that's the place where I think you and I are, have a common alignment is, you know, stop trying to fill a gap by choosing a tool
Yeah.
and look at the overall roadmap of where you're trying to achieve and then work backwards, like you said, to make sure the data is moving along, kind of in the train, the data is moving from joint to joint to joint to joint, but you're not leaving anything behind, right? You're trying to aspire to have that output at the end of the day. Did I kind of capture, you know, a lot of the important points you were talking about in there?
Yeah, that's right. Right. So when you look at technology that way, and we were fortunate because, right, we were doing a lot of work in technology at my other like job where I was a board member. And so we could test all these different technologies. And the problem that the consultants have to contend with is they're super knowledgeable, they're really bright people, they're very good people, but they actually don't operate technology during the day. And you put a golf club in Tiger Woods' hand and you put one in my hand, the same club, you're going to have radically different results, right? Like I may be able to hit the ball, right? One out of three times, I know I'm going to hit that thing, right? Like, but but therein lies the problem. And the way we approached this was really laying out all those operations and then going and finding technology firms that were willing to let us come inside with them and help think about solving these problems. And so where we got to was a massive process of elimination, right? And people think, oh, we're beholden to one technology company. We're not resellers of technology. We are engineering and design partners and early adopters of emerging technologies. So we get very close to some really extraordinary venture capital firms like the folks from Motive Ventures in New York, London, and Berlin. And when they're working on new stuff, we get the opportunity to go look at these really interesting companies. Or inversely, we were like, hey, we're looking for someone that can solve for this. And we tell all these venture firms that we know, if you have anybody doing work in this space, we want to know them. Right. And so we cherish those relationships because it gives us a really good insight into what's going on inside the technology. And so through that process of elimination, and we also have companies then that now that we're pretty well known after being doing this for 6 years, people are always trying to come to us and sell us technology, which is was nice, right? Like, and we want to test these things all the time so that we can look for enrichment of data. We can look for something that's doing something better, right? We're working with a company out of Y Combinator, um, right, in Northern California, a bunch of Stanford guys, very bright guys. And what we're working on right now in beta with them is a project to look at enriched data for private equity holdings. So it's actually going to go inside the fund and go to the portfolio company level data. When that portfolio company makes a filing with their agent in Delaware, wherever their agent is, they've got agentic um, bots that are going and pinging that website looking for that data filing. And when it happens, then you'll have much more enriched data about what's going on under the hood at all your private equity funds, right? So we look at the world sort of like, where can we find common problems? Where can we find common problems? It's a problem for your family office, John. It's a problem for somebody else's, right? And how can we automate that? And that's really fundamentally what we do. So the elimination, it's unfortunate because we have a lot of good friends that work for all these technology companies. We certainly like them a lot. It's just we can't get their technology to do what we can do with an alternative piece of technology.
Well, but they also, I would assume, appreciate the feedback of where their deficit gaps are,
Yeah.
right? So they're trying to serve the market you're serving. And so if it's a way they can gather feedback so that they know, okay, here's three gaps we need to fill in order to be a viable partner in the marketplace, that's probably extraordinarily valuable for them, right?
It could be. I mean, if they have, they better have some thick skin if they're out here doing it.
Right.
Like, I'm sorry,
True.
your baby is not that pretty. I'm just sorry. Like it's not, right? I mean, I
Mhm.
hope she grows up a little bit and gets better, but like right now, not so much.
Yep.
Um, and that's really valuable too for when we look for leading companies, right? So the company we came that I mentioned earlier that's working on this project for private equity. Like if we can come to an early relationship with an emerging technology company, we can be really good early access partners for them in helping design the technology, their go-to-market strategy. Like this particular company said, "Oh, we're going to do this in rich data and alternatives." I'm like, "That's interesting." Like, and then you can also look at that from a funnel standpoint. You can actually in some of these new technologies place your offering memorandum documents in the system, your investor documents, subscription agreements, and you can write the screens that you want it to screen the data for and knock a bunch of things out so that you don't have to have your investment team look at it, right?
Right.
So the structure might be wrong, the fee structure might be wrong. There's some provisions that you would just automatically say, no way, we're not going to invest in a structure like this or an area like this or something. And that's a really good application for agentic AI, right? Where you
Hmm.
go in and look at all that, these big large language models. But he was like, we're going to charge $750 per investment. I'm like, you're out of your mind. Like, I mean, yeah, you can go after Sepris and you can go after Caisa and some of these firms where they're going to plan sponsors or sovereign funds. And that makes sense. Those people will pay a lot of money because they already pay a lot of money. They have a huge budget, right? Nonprofits pay a lot of money because they actually have a budget to run it like a business, right? So,
Right.
like, they'll pay for that because they're paying seven figures already now for benchmarking services that are awful. But I go, family offices aren't going to spend that money, right? They're just
Right.
not, right? This. They can be incredibly frugal with where they want to spend. Um, Now I go, however, like we'd love to work with you and think about pulling data through your system and helping you build the product and helping you go to market because if it works really well for us and we want to have access to it and we want to interconnect that right through the rest of the system so that all these things happen without human beings uploading things and over a 2 month period we'd go back and forth and he came back a few weeks back and he was like, how about a $25,000 POC? I'm like, yeah, okay. And he goes, okay, I'll sign you up. I go, no, no, no. I thought you were going to pay me. Like, I'm not paying you. Like, why would I pay you to build your product? Right.
Right.
Like, and like, he didn't like this. And then like, I go, lovely guy, French name. And I'm like, maybe he just doesn't understand me. Like I'm not paying him to build this product. Quite the contrary. If we do this and we do the heavy lifting and we give great feedback, because it should be valuable to him, this. People come in and tell you all the time, John, take a look at this technology. And they're really trying to build it around you. And they can't be fully transparent with you because they're not sure if this is direction that you should go in or not. So
Right.
they're testing it around you. I'm like, look, let's get out of this waste of time that you go to a POC with somebody because you guys are kind of acting like you know where to go, but you don't really know where to go. You're trying to get them to give you feedback on where to go. So let's just
Right.
take that out and be direct with each other. And then we'll work with you um, and if it works, I'll help you with go to market. I'll help you think about pricing. I'll help you connect to all these other different places in the ecosystem to solve your problem. And if that works out well, then we'd like an 80% discount on the product forever. We just pass that savings through to our clients, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
it's really unique because we've become these really fun engineering technology design partners with amazing firms, right? We want to lean into firms that are spending the most on R&D, that are trying to solve unique problems. Older technology companies aren't that interesting to us. But I'll give you an example of one that is Adipar, right? Adipar is a 15, 16-year-old company, but they spent $120 million on R&D last year, right? They
Yep.
act like a real mature company,
Right.
right, in this fintech space. And this technology is moving so fast that I find it inconceivable that some technology firm thinks they're going to create a product that solves everything for everybody. There's too many problems.
Right.
There's too many problems to solve for. Like we're just starting to work with, I think I shared with you before, a company out of London, and we've been looking for a product like this for 3 years. We tested several that can help us digitally value artwork, right? So we're working on an engagement right now. Somebody, their family offices between London and Dallas, and to some degree Greece, and like 85% of their wealth is tied up in art, right? And so
Yep.
they need the time series data because the ownership changes across different legal structures of things. They have loans against certain things; those needs to be tracked, and that valuation stuff needs to work. And so, we've been working with that company in Natapar to move that data in and track a piece of art as if it's a share of Google, right? It
Hmm.
doesn't matter to
Hmm.
us. What's really cool about that is we can put a tag in there and we can pull the insurance company data into it as well. So that if the piece of art that you have in the collection goes up by 20%, it should create an alert so that whoever is managing that from a risk standpoint can see, hey, we're out of equilibrium with our insurance coverage. Do we want to elevate it or not? At least you can make a conscious decision. Do
Right.
you want to pay a higher premium? Is it protected? We have a prospective client that we're working with, private equity guy, has a sizable art collection, like $350 million, and it's all held in trust. So that means he cares about the valuation data on it, and he wants it insured because on any given day he loans it out to like the Museum of Modern Art in New York, like 30% of his collection. It's always rotating around somewhere, so he
Right.
needs to have his premium covered appropriately, right? So that's what I say. Like, look, we keep looking for more problems, and I don't know how somebody with 12 or 24 design and engineering people can compete with a company that's got 450 trying to solve one thing.
No.
Right. So that's another problem that people like they always do this, and it's just so frustrating to observe. You know this, John. They make their choices on something based on price. And I'm like, you got suckered, right? You're gonna be doing this. Like it just pains me because I know within 3 years they're gonna be rewriting this whole thing.
Right.
Like they're going to go redo it again. And you know this better than anybody, John. Backfilling data is awful work. It's terrible. Nobody wants to do it. It's expensive. It's manual, and it's almost always inaccurate, right? So, like,
Other than that,
yeah, right, Mrs. Lincoln, how'd you like the play?
that's right.
Yeah, but like, and so we share everything we do with anybody all the time. You know this, right? Like, and we're not proprietary. Our intellectual property that we have is our ability to move data and structure it through these different tools. And so, my partner Alejandro, he's got this concept, decentralized innovation, centralized data management. And that's totally us. Like we're looking for leading people on in picking the right partners on innovation. That's what makes us really unique, right? And so yeah, that's it's super fun because we keep getting exposed to all these really interesting things. And if we do our jobs properly, which we've been able to do heretofore, that means all of our clients get this really enriched experience at a fraction of the expense of them trying to do it themselves, right?
Right.
Because the thesis was outsource, and outsourcing has certainly grown over the past 6 years, right?
Yep.
You've seen this. You guys have a great practice for outsourced accounting. The adoption of that is really blowing up because people are realizing now, how much headcount can they have, right? In 2019, when we spun this out of the family office, um, BCG had a report out that at $1 billion, if you're going to run a high performing family office, that's a whole nother podcast, a high performing family office. Your budget's 56 basis points. That's for tax, legal, oversight, administration. That is not real estate. That is not planes. That is not boats. That is not toys. The real estate may cover your office footprint, but that's it, right?
Right.
56 basis points. And that doesn't include any investment expenses. So no private equity expenses, none of that. And when you look at that number, that's astonishing, right? The average family office, I think, at $1 billion, to wait this piece out, I think it's 13 people is the headcount in there. And it's continuously growing because the burden continues to grow,
Right.
right? The administrative burden. JP Morgan talked
Because they're
about
not
here.
looking at. I mean, they're not looking at an overall roadmap and design of the systems. They're just basically grinding through it by hiring people to process more and more data. Right.
Throwing bodies, right? And the problem is, even when they go for technology, like Deloitte's real piece out, they came out, the 10 things they're focused on right now. Technology is like, always number one, two, that family offices are thinking about, right? And then like 40% of them recognize that they don't have any confidence inside to understand what they're looking at when they're doing this, right? So our thesis on that was like, let's democratize $1 billion family office experience. In fact, let's democratize a $5 billion single family office experience. Because at the end of the day, when we started building this, we way undershot where we were going into the market. We knew everyone was frustrated. We were frustrated. We knew everybody wasn't good at adopting technology. We were not. And we, like my friends at the family office, had done it 3 times with great consultants, right?
Mhm.
And so we were like, okay, we spoke to folks at a peer firm of yours, tax firm, really big family office practice, and they're like, all of our clients are frustrated with this. We speak to the largest law firm focused on this, over 700 family offices. They're like, all of our clients are frustrated. They hate this, right? It's an unlimited budget is what they feel like. And I think you have 2 different types of people that have a family office. Generally speaking, people that grew up in financial services that understand liquidity and assets like that can grow wealth and do things. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you get people that had a big liquidity event and they made the money and they remember starting the company on a shoestring and they run the family office that way, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
like,
QuickBooks.
yeah. And they're like, ignorance is bliss to them. They don't know what they're paying their providers. They have no idea,
Right.
right? And I'm like, wow, and I'll keep it clean here, but I'm like, has that bank ever taken you to the private dining room over on Park Avenue? And they're like, oh, it's amazing. Views are outstanding. I'm like, hey, did you have dinner with the chairman? Yeah, lovely guy. I'm like, did you pick up the tab and dinner? Oh no, not at all, right? I mean, they paid for that. I'm like, no, they didn't. You paid for
That's
it.
right.
You bought him dinner at their private club.
Hmm.
You go to tennis tournaments, you're paying. Like if you're not going to those things and you have this much money, you need a better relationship because
Right.
you're paying for that big event sponsorship, whether you're going or not.
Hmm.
Right? So like helping that educate that. I really think I should go back to college again and become an industrial psychologist if I want to be successful. Right? 'Cause, like, right now, all I try and do when we meet people is qualify whether or not they want to run a high performing family office. And if they don't, it's totally cool.
Right.
Right. But be conscious of what you're trying to do with your family.
Right.
Like, where are you trying to go?
Right. So this wraps up the first part of this episode. Part 2, where we dive deeper into the technology and outcome-driven solutions, will drop next Thursday, March 20th. Please be on the lookout for that.